So what does this all mean for users? Well, let's ask Democratic strategist Zach Friend and cyber attorney Leeza Garber. All right, Leeza, let me start with you. Jack Dorsey's been under the gun. He has been extremely active this year, reaching out behind the scenes to conservatives. I know I've met with him twice myself. So he acknowledges there's a problem. He says he wants to find a solution. Where does it go from here?
This is a problem that has been going on for some time, and Trump's really drawing attention to it, and Twitter's CEO is also drawing attention to it by saying we do have a left-leaning bias. The issue here is what laws can actually affect how these different platforms, including Google and social media companies, can really change. Part of the issue is that there are no regulations in the United States that actually affect these organizations in terms of what they're posting. And that includes not only what their users are posting in terms of content, but additionally how they're ranking it, what their algorithms are. Google's algorithm itself is notoriously really closely held and guarded. So it's very difficult to understand how we're seeing what we're seeing in our news feeds and then also what people are posting every day.
Zach, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that in many respects, actually, the perceived bias is more important than the actual bias. There's been no data that actually backs up the fact that there is bias, but by having these hearings, by having it amplified, ironically, on the same platforms by the president that they're claiming bias, I think that many people will actually believe it. Social media really is the great equalizer. You have an ability to speak directly to your audience in a way without filter that you couldn't historically.
So I will say this, Zach, as a black man, when someone talks about perceived bias and actual bias, I've dealt with that stuff my whole life, and I think it's bunk, okay? To have to prove something when you know it exists, we know how data is, we know that. Listen, you've got the CEO of the company admitting that there's a left-leaning bias. I've met with him personally. He's admitted to me that there's a left-leaning bias. And by the way, it goes into the algorithm programming as well. The key, though, is should there be a solution? In your mind, Zach, should the government be involved at all? Or should the company be allowed to just say, hey, we're left-leaning?
Charles, I'd like to step in.
Well, let Zach answer, and I'll come back to you, Leeza,
I think a point of clarification is important here. The CEO said that his employees have a left-leaning bias. He's not saying that the platform itself has a left-leaning bias. I mean, look, as a Democrat, I've had plenty of doctors that are Republicans that have treated me great. I worked at a law enforcement agency for a long time where a number of the people that I worked with were Republicans, and they didn't say, hey, that person's a Democrat, we're not going to go to a call for service. Just because an employee has an admitted bias doesn't necessarily mean that the platform or the overall system associated with it does. I don't think that this is something that really is going to be easy for Congress to regulate. And I do think, and I actually agree with the fact that this is something that ultimately is going to be adjudicated. I think that the Supreme Court is going to need to ultimately make a decision about whether these are free speech platforms or whether this is something that requires some sort of regulation.
Well, Leeza, you're the attorney. Will they ultimately come under at least the same kind of scrutiny that media companies are currently under?
Charles, I completely agree and empathize, and I think that many of these companies are hiding behind not only the First Amendment, but the Communications Decency Act, which shields any internet company from any liability for what's posted. And we can see that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, was very opaque in his congressional testimony. I don't know what's going to come out of these processes, but I can tell you lawmakers continue to struggle to keep up with the state of technology, and social media is just another example of that. So the American people deserve a better opportunity to be heard, and they need to understand how this technology actually works, because if you think about it, these behemoths like Google, Facebook, and Twitter, there are no alternatives to them. There is no other Facebook option or another Google option. That's it. So to have no regulation, it doesn't make sense.
Although we all get a little nervous, right, once you open that regulatory door, because you might ironically stop any future competition from being able to get around that new moat that could be created. Hey, thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.